1 month from now, as I record this video, LG will have announced the successor to the TV I'm about to review for you. Yep, I've never before reviewed a TV so late in the year. That's 2023 for you. But as it turns out, I think right now is the perfect time to be talking about the LG C3 OLED TV. So let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and it has been one heck of a year talking about TVs. We spent a lot of time talking about the absolute best OLED TVs you can buy, as well as the best LED TVs you can buy, including the best bang for your buck models on the market. The LG C3 kind of sits in the middle of all that discussion, with the Sony A80L and the Samsung S90C flanking it. Well, and apparently the Samsung S89C is in there too, but more on that in a bit. Now, the LG C3 offers like, I don't know, 90% of the performance of those super premium, super expensive TVs, but at a much more approachable price. Again, within the premium TV sphere. Today, we're gonna talk about why you should, or perhaps should not, buy the LG C3, and stick around to the end because after we do that, we're gonna talk about why the LG C3 is itself a symbol for what LG needs to do in 2024, specifically with the model that will eventually replace this TV, what I'm presuming will be called the LG C4 OLED. So let's get into it. Out of the box, the LG C3 delivers a lot of wow factor. It's designed so that most of the electronics are tucked into a little bump out toward the lower third of the TV's backside. This leaves the impossibly thin panel up top sitting proudly to wow your friends. Now, unlike the step-up G3 OLED, which comes with a wall mount in the box, the C3 comes with a tabletop stand. So if you do want to mount it, you'll need to buy a mount separately. Also in the box is LG's Magic Motion remote, along with some product literature, and that's about it. Attaching the TV stand is a piece of cake, and while you may be tempted to hoist this thing up onto your media cabinet alone, I urge you to get some help. See, I did. Because you're gonna spend a fair chunk of change on this thing, and you know, accidents happen, so don't let it happen to you. Now, in case you haven't gone TV shopping in a while, LG TV ship with LG's WebOS software running the show. If you've never owned a smart TV before, I think you're gonna get along with WebOS just fine. It's actually kind of fun, but it's also very powerful and loaded with features. Too many features, if you ask me. There's so much stuff here that it can eventually feel overwhelming, especially for someone just transitioning from an older TV. The basic WebOS setup is a piece of cake. On-screen prompts walk you right through the whole thing. And after that, there's quite a bit to discover. Now, you may find yourself having to approve updates all the time. It seems like every time I open Netflix, there's an update to install. And I'm all for having the latest and greatest version of an app or operating system. That's better than not supporting the TV and letting things get old, outdated, and crusty. And to LG's credit, those updates are lightning fast. I can't even get mad about waiting on an update to watch content when the wait is so short. But guys, it's like so many updates all the time. Anyway, back to the setup. As you let LG's WebOS wizard walk you through the process, it's gonna ask you about AI picture this and AI sound that. You can give these a try, but since I'm kind of a purist, I prefer to leave these options disabled. Also, in the past, I have not had the best luck with the AI sound feature. No, hard no. It often creates this wash of fake surround sound, which I don't care for, and that has the unintended consequence of washing over the dialogue from time to time. And as for AI picture, I don't personally care for the results most of the time, but that doesn't mean you won't love it, so feel free to play around with it. You can turn it on and off at your discretion. There's also a wizard that attempts to figure out what kind of picture profile you may prefer, whether you might want the standard mode or the filmmaker mode or whatever. It will create a custom picture profile for you by putting up a bunch of slides. You pick the 2 images that you like best out of the 6 that are on display. And after you've done this several times, it comes up with what it thinks you might want to watch. Now, I like the idea that LG has here, where it's basically coaching people to select a picture preset rather than just go with the default out-of-the-box settings. However, I don't like the result that it ends up offering. So frankly, I would skip this part if I were you. One thing you absolutely need to do though, no matter what picture profile you pick, is disable the eco settings, because if you don't, you are not getting all the brightness and contrast that you paid for. Here's what that looks like. Out of the box, the TV will be in an auto power saving mode. Now you can disable this by selecting any other picture preset. For SDR, I recommend Cinema or Filmmaker mode. In HDR, Cinema mode is my preference. Cinema Home is a bit brighter. Just know that you'll need to disable motion smoothing if you don't like it, because it is turned on by default in Cinema Home. Then you need to go into Settings, General, and Energy Savings. And here you can turn this off to unlock the brightness potential of the TV. Now, while the basic get up and running setup is a breeze, I'm still frustrated with how long it takes to get your preferred picture settings implemented across apps and HDMI inputs. There's an Apply Setting to All Inputs option here that makes you think that your SDR, HDR, and Dolby Vision picture modes will be implemented across apps and all the HDMI inputs, but it is not. It just means that your customized version of any given picture mode, let's say, like I did, you adjust Filmmaker mode a little bit, it makes sure that that adjusted version of Filmmaker mode or whatever will be available to you in other inputs and apps. You still have to select the picture mode that you want for SDR, HDR, and Dolby Vision on each of the 4 HDMI inputs. So even though I made those 3 selections on HDMI 1, I had to go in and do it again for HDMI 2, 3, and 4. That means that for the HDMI inputs alone, I had to make 12 picture mode selections. And you have to do it for apps too. Thankfully, you don't have to make selections for each individual app. For example, once you customize Dolby Vision for Netflix, that same Dolby Vision picture mode will be used for Max and Disney+. But you still have to do SDR, HDR, and Dolby Vision selections for apps, meaning that you have to do a total of 15 individual picture preset selections across all sources for this TV. And while that allows more customization, I guess, I think it's a huge hassle. Other TV platforms copy your preferences across HDMI inputs and apps, and I way prefer that. And I think it's definitely the best user experience for most customers. I mean, getting folks to adjust their picture mode is already difficult enough. Telling them they have to do it 15 times, that's just no good. Anyway, once I got the C3 all set up and let it run some content for a while, I dove into measuring it, which brings us to a segment I like to call Numbers for Nit Nerds. Numbers for Nit Nerds is where we dive into measurement results and talk about what they mean. If you are not interested in the nerd stuff, please skip ahead using the timestamps that we have down below this video. I'll be talking about the real life performance of this TV when we're done with this section. Okay, so starting with peak brightness, I maxed out all of the brightness settings for SDR. That means brightness setting at 100 and peak brightness set to high. And I was not at all surprised to measure peak brightness at 400 nits in SDR with a 10% window and 150 nits full screen white. That's very respectable for any TV and especially for an OLED. In HDR, I got 800 nits from a 10% window, and again, 800 nits using the real-life HDR peak highlight test on the Spears and Munsell disc. SDR color measurements came in looking excellent, but not when I had the brightness settings maxed out. I saw just a couple of color errors up in the delta E of 8 neighborhood with all those brightness settings maxed out. But as soon as I restored Filmmaker mode to its default settings, color measurements were outstanding. In HDR, color measurements were also excellent, with errors only in the absolute brightest and totally darkest colors, showing me what I already know about WRGB OLED, which is that low luminance colors stray from being absolutely accurate, and the brightest colors don't remain as pure as we'd see from a QD OLED. Keep that in mind for later. In terms of the 2-point white balance, in SDR, it was just about perfect out of the box. In HDR though, the errors barely tipped over the technically visible neighborhood, but not by a whole lot. I ended up having to knock the green down in the 2-point white balance to get to a perfect D65 white point, as you can see here. Now, I do not recommend you mimic these settings on your own C3, as it's entirely possible these settings could do more harm than good on your TV, given that any two TVs are rarely the same. Our motion test showed the LG C3 doing a very admirable job with motion resolution. Just a bit of stutter apparent in 24 FPS content due to the OLED panel's instant response time. This is totally normal. I do think that Sony's deft and lighter-handed motion smoothing for cinematic content is preferable. LG's Real Cinema setting introduces more soap opera effect than I'm personally willing to tolerate, but you may feel very differently about that. Tone mapping appeared excellent using both 1000 and 4000 nit patterns with no excessive clipping in the brightest areas. Now this is a good sign for preserving highlight detail, but I'll be checking that in real-world content momentarily. So, as a recap, by the measurements, the LG C3 is a stellar performer. Definitely what you should expect from a premium TV. And the good news is that the measurements are a good indication of what you'll get when watching real content. LG C3 is just an outstanding OLED TV. I don't think we should be surprised by that. The C series has always been excellent. Its 800 nits of peak HDR brightness is more than enough for moderately lit to dark rooms. In fact, if you're putting your TV in a dedicated media room, I think the C3 is a better choice over the brighter MLA-equipped G3 TV. You just don't need the super juiced brightness of the G3 if you're building a specialized media room or home theater. All of the demo content I viewed looked outstanding. LG's processing has come a long way in the past few years and is dangerously close to Sony's processing. Sony will tend to preserve color accuracy over brightness punch, so while the LG C3 may not be as technically color accurate as a Sony OLED, it's got a brighter, punchier vibe, yet it stops short of over-brightening the picture, which we've seen with some competing OLEDs. The LG C3's preservation of bright highlight detail was solid, and its shadow detail preservation is particularly good, especially compared to LED TVs, where shadow detail is sometimes sacrificed in the effort to get the truly inky blacks that OLED TVs just pull off naturally. Really, folks, this TV is an absolute treat to watch, and I have no problem recommending it to anyone. Hell, this TV replaced the Sony A95L as my daily TV, and I don't miss that much more expensive Sony QD OLED nearly as much as I thought I would. I love the LG C3. It looks amazing. Make no mistake, it does just about everything right. It is almost a slam dunk. Almost. See, there's just one big problem here. LG has real competition this year. So let's talk about that. Let's take a look at the pricing of the C3 among its closest competition. Keeping in mind, the prices are definitely subject to change, especially in the coming months. The 65-inch C3 model reviewed here comes in at $1,600. The Samsung S90C, which is a QD OLED TV, comes in at $1,600. And Sony A80L, which uses the same panel as the C3 but has Sony's processing and Google TV built in, comes in at just $100 more, $1,700. 2 to 3 years ago, the LG C series stood alone. It was significantly less expensive than the Sony competition, and QD OLED didn't exist yet. So it was a slam dunk choice for anyone wanting an OLED TV but not needing to go to the absolute top of the line like the LG G series. The LG C series doesn't stand alone anymore. If you want the best color brightness and color purity, the Samsung S90C delivers that. If you want the most cinematic look with the best motion resolution and slightly better upscaling, that's what the Sony A80L offers. I do still think that the LG C3 is perhaps the best gaming TV you can buy. I trust WRGB OLED TVs a bit more than QD OLEDs when it comes to long-term burn-in risk. And the fact that LG's TVs offer 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs means it will be favored over the Sony A80L by some gamers. Guys, what I'm getting at is that I think LG needs to consider dropping the price of the C series. If Samsung and Sony are coming to the market with competitive TVs that have their own advantages at the exact same price, then in order for the C series to regain its no-brainer just buy it status, it's gonna need to undercut the competition on price. And honestly, I feel like LG should be able to do that by now. LG dominated the OLED TV market for about 10 years. Its sister company, LG Display, makes the panels, which means that LG Electronics should be saving a bit on panel cost and have a bit more margin to play around with. LG has also been making these OLED TVs for over 10 years now, and I feel like its efficiency and scalability in terms of production should contribute toward being able to lower the price a bit. Plus, we have much less expensive mini LED TVs now offering higher brightness and black levels that are dangerously close to OLED. LG C-Series OLEDs just need to make a more compelling case going forward. Speaking of going forward, I think LG could make the C4 more compelling if its price comes in a bit lower than the C3 did when it was introduced. But if the C4 does launch at a lower price, then the C3's price needs to drop even more as those 2024 models roll out. And that could make the C3 the no-brainer purchase that I really want it to be. The LG C3, it is a stellar TV, and if you buy one, you will absolutely love it, especially those of you who don't watch TV with sunlight just drenching your room. The C3 offers the best picture quality you can get at a more reasonable price than brighter, pricier, ultra-premium OLEDs. If you're the kind of shopper who's doing your research and weighing your options, you'll want to consider whether the Sony A80L or the Samsung S90C might be a better fit. That's just not something that I've had to say in years past. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. What do you think of my take on the LG C3? Did I get it right or did I miss something? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like. I didn't write myself an outro again.